my family's had land down here, or used land down here, since about 1880, and I've since become a landowner of my share, my part of that inheritance, and so I've been running wildlife tours on this property since 1999. It was formerly I ran cattle on here, but then I decided to take the cattle off and show people some of the natural values of the place. And I was influenced by a wildlife biologist who just gradually increased my understanding of what makes up the landscape. I started to understand the detail, and I decided that I didn't want my vehicle impacts to intrude on that detail anymore, and I didn't think I wanted cattle on the sensitive areas, which was mostly the foreshore. So I was just influenced by a peer in that sense, and I wasn't pressured in any way. I was just given an understanding, and at the end of the day thought, no, I want to do this a bit differently. It's a really interesting landscape. I mean, it's really rugged, and it sort of hits you in the face when you see it. It's big and it's beautiful, but it's really intricate as well. And I think that's the thing I've sort of found out. I used to ride a horse around here mustering cattle, just thinking, gee, this is pretty. Now I know a lot of the detail, and what it shows you is that it's not just got an incredible Aboriginal history, it's got an incredible variety of plants, rare plants, and the same with the fauna. You know, it's absolutely loaded with rare birds, rare carnivorous marsupials, but also common animals that are also really interesting. The more time you spend in the landscape, the more things you see. And it's not just happening on land, it's happening out at sea. Albatross, shearwaters, you know, a whole host of things, gannets going on, penguins offshore. A lot of the decisions I made about what was going to happen with this property were related to land management. It's a fragile soil, but it's also very rich in Aboriginal sites, Aboriginal history, and as I've talked about, rare and threatened species. So my whole perspective was in reducing the imprint, in softening the impact on the landscape. And that's where we're struggling at the moment with the history of the place has meant that the word's got out about the Arthur Pieman. You know, people now understand that there's a sensational place up here, and it's sensational for recreation, it's sensational for fishing, it's sensational for a whole lot of the softer things, you know, whether it's views or spectacular landscapes. So it's satisfying a lot of people are coming here. The future for the place is actually managing those people and their impacts on the landscape. And it's going to be hard. There's going to be tears. And it's one of the things that, with so many people now having an ownership of the place, it's really difficult for them to surrender that ownership. And a part of that ownership is the sense of freedom. But the way the place has gone and the popularity of it, the way it's increased like that, you can't have those sort of impacts on the place from those many people without having regulation. So it's a really challenging time for people in this landscape, people that have grown up used to the freedoms that it offers, and now they're seeing that there have to be restrictions brought on, and they're not actually seeing the links between their activities and why those restrictions are coming. But I think the educational side of things over the next year or two will show that, and we'll have people probably going back in time to what they used to enjoy the place for, which was, you know, the quiet moments. Now it's a fairly noisy place. In summertime in particular, it's dominated by off-road vehicle use. I think we'll see a slightly different perspective, well, not a slightly different perspective, but a different perspective on the place in the future. Oh, capital L for love. No, my relationship with the Parks and Wildlife Service is great. You know, like it's, they have a really hard job to do, but they are the leaders, and you know, they might make decisions that I don't agree with, but you really need leadership, and they are the land managers, and they are the ones that have to do the hard work. What they need is the support of their management, and as much as they can get, because I think one thing about this place is that it's underrated. I don't think many of the people involved in the boards of tourism or the Tourism Industry Council or the politicians in the state really understand what the value of this place can be to Tasmania and what it is even now. I guess its specialness is really defined to me when I actually bring visitors here. So with the tourists that I bring through the place, it's their reaction to it now that actually points out to me what's special about it. I love its ruggedness. I love its changeability. I love the variety of plants and animals that you have in it. But they all sort of make up a picture, and each day it's different. I actually say to the people that come here, don't worry about going to Berrydale and seeing Mona. We've got it here. We've got ancient, we've got antiquities. We've got beautiful things. We've got rare and threatened things here. So the Aboriginal heritage, when I realised what a treasure trove of Aboriginal heritage we had here, that was a real museum and sites that were going back hundreds of years, thousands of years. I was actually really happy that I'd made the decisions I had, because it just confirmed to me that I'd made the right decision about my land management, and that we were really lucky to have a place like this. When I first started, it was suggested to me that when I took the cattle off that I could show people Tasmanian devils, and I thought, stinking filthy animals, I don't want to look at them. And it wasn't until I'd done a couple of nights that I realised actually that there was this fascinating animal in the landscape, and I think those sort of surprises are all the way through this Arthur Pymon area. Things that you take for granted are actually quite complex and interesting. So the tours ended up bringing a type of person into the landscape that I hadn't really met much before, and they were people that took their pleasure out of really simple things. I can talk to them and give them an understanding of history and that sort of thing, but they get their biggest buzz out of the landscape itself. They get out of the waves, out of the rugged rocks, and then ultimately when they move on to seeing some of the animals up close, that's a highlight as well. They have a real buzz about the history of the place as well. But it's actually the simple things that they like. Now, that's a great formula for success, because you can have very passive management of land and reasonable numbers of people in it, and your basic infrastructure can be set away in a town or something like that, and you can have people wandering out. Because I guess one of the surprises was how many people are interested in bird watching, for heaven's sake. And we have some special interest with our 12 endemic birds in Tasmania, and it's a multi-million-dollar industry overseas. So there's enormous capacity to take in many, many more people in a very soft way, soft impact on the landscape, merely by having them walking through the landscape and enjoying the natural values of it. I can bring them down here, and generally I'm walking with them and talking to them. But the most important thing is to let them have a bit of time on their own in the landscape. And in fact, I could do that for an hour or so before my tour started if I wanted to, because they're captivated. And I think that's the thing that comes out of it for me. I get a lot of pride out of the way people react to this landscape, because I have a feeling of ownership of it. I've been here for a long time, as a lot of other people have a feeling of ownership. So it's a real feeling of pride that they're actually stunned by it, staggered by it, and they are the words they use. It's all superlatives.